right, so we are going to be drinking Mellow Corn. So this is a personal favorite of mine. It's a 4-year-old 100 proof bottled and bond corn whiskey, which is very unique in the whiskey industry. No other bottled and bond corn whiskeys on the market. Love the label, love the old-fashioned nature to Mellow Corn. Being a corn whiskey, you can reuse a barrel. So the main difference between this and a bourbon is the reuse barrel. So if you're using a second or third or fourth use barrel, you're going to get less barrel characteristic in the flavor profile than you would in, say, a bourbon, which is first use. So when you have less barrel characteristic, you get more spirit character. So this being predominantly corn, the corn is really going to shine through. So you should get notes of like cornbread, sweet corn, all of those great corn flavors that aren't overshadowed by a strong, oaky, charred flavor. Being bottled and bond, again, it's exactly 100 proof. It's all made at Heaven Hill, can't be sourced from anywhere else. One distilling season, exactly 100 proof, and aged in fairly bonded warehouses. So enjoy.
And it's got a great, just smooth flavor, even for the underproof.
Oh yeah,
corn just kind of slides in, and you go, oh wow, wow, that's kind of got.
When you drink this, you say, oh my god, how can a bottle that looks like this that costs $13 be so smooth?
And you have a tattoo, I believe, of corn.
If you have to guess, I love my bottle and bond whiskey and my Mellow Corn right there. So
there you go.
I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did.
Jason, thank you so much for everything tonight. Really appreciate it. It's working out.
All right, guys. If you want to pour your second whiskey, Evan Williams Bottled and Bond, let's get into what bottled and bond means a little bit. So it came from the Bottled and Bond Act of 1897. Prior to 1897, you could make whiskey in your bathtub, or you could make alcohol in your bathtub and add like iodine and tobacco juice and all this gross stuff to it, and turpentine. Have you ever heard the term rot gut whiskey? That's where it came from, because people were drinking all this poison in their alcohol and it was rotting their guts, so it was rot gut whiskey. So the US government came to the distillers and said, if you let us monitor your process from start to finish, so we know you're not adding iodine and tobacco juice, we will tax you on it after it's aged. Why that means something to the distillers is we lose about 8% per year to evaporation, so we got to pay less in tax after 4 years. And why it meant something to the government is it was the first form of quality control for food or drink. So I know Americans love whiskey because before we had the FDA, we had the Bottled and Bond Act. So we cared about quality of whiskey before quality of food, which I think is important. But anyway, so really, really cool time in our history. It really changed whiskey, and it really just made sure that there was no more opportunity for people to trick consumers until marketing got really good and we started putting things like small batch and things like that on the label. But that's another story for another time. So Evan Williams is our flagship whiskey. It's really the workhorse of Heaven Hill. #2 bourbon in the world is Evan Williams. And the only reason we're #2 is because Jim Beam sells better overseas. So we're doing about 13 million cases a year of Evan Williams. And that's just the black label. I didn't say that. So the normal one, the black label, is 5 to 6 years old and 86 proof. That's the Evan Williams everybody knows. This is the white label, bottled and bond. So it's 4 years old and 100 proof, because that's what you have to be bottled and bond. So a little bit younger, a little bit stronger, a little bit less corn than the last one. This one is 78% corn, 12% malted barley, and 10% rye. Same exact recipe we used for that toasted barrel Elijah Craig you just tried, Henry McKenna. The same recipe we use for all of our bourbons. So anyway, enjoy it, and I'll come around if you have any questions. Yeah.
This is one of my favorites.
And Jason, it's all yours.
Okay.
For those that need the color, it is yellow. Thank you.
Bartender's favorite.
Yep. Let's go ahead and pour our yellow whiskey into the glass. This is our rye whiskey, Rittenhouse. Maryland is a rye state, so is Pennsylvania. In fact, up until World War I and then Prohibition, those were the top 2 rye whiskey producing states in the U.S. When the First World War came around, you had to do your patriotic duty, and you stopped making alcohol for people to purchase, and you started making alcohol for the war effort. They needed it for solvents and other things. So,
soldiers.
Hey, Maryland.
Is this similar to what just happened with hand sanitizer?
Yeah. We did. We stepped up again, right? So, I mean, Maryland and Pennsylvania were top 2 states doing their part to help win the war. But when you stop being able to sell your whiskey during the war, and then the U.S. government decides to outlaw whiskey and all alcohol for some reason, you know, it's pretty tough on your industry. So the rye whiskey industry was pretty much dead in Maryland and in Pennsylvania. One of the two brands that kind of lasted through all of that are Rittenhouse and Pikesville, which now are both owned by Heaven Hill. So Rittenhouse is after Rittenhouse Square in Philadelphia. So it was traditionally a Pennsylvania-style rye, which has a higher rye percentage. And then Pikesville, right here out of Maryland, that was a Maryland-style rye, which incorporated more corn. The more north you go, the better rye grows as a crop. The more south you go, the better corn grows. So the whole reason that American whiskey is predominantly corn is strictly because corn grew really well here when we first settled in the U.S. People didn't have like a family recipe for making whiskey. If they had leftover crops after they harvested, they turned it into whiskey so it wouldn't rot. And we had more and more corn, so we made corn whiskey. So another tangent I could go down. But that being said, Rittenhouse and Pikesville are now owned by Heaven Hill. We are a family-owned company, and we care about preserving these old labels that would have otherwise gone out of business. So they're both made under our same recipe now. So there's no more Pennsylvania and Maryland style rye. The only difference between this and Pikesville is this is 4 years old and 100 proof because it's bottled in bond. And then Pikesville is 6 to 8 years old and 110 proof. So Pikesville is Rittenhouse's big brother. Everything else is the same other than it's more alcohol and aged longer. This one right here, Rittenhouse Rye, if you want to go ahead and taste it if you haven't already. We've gone from corn-based whiskeys to rye-based whiskeys, so more pepper and spice, less sweetness.
And if you haven't been to Rittenhouse Square in Philadelphia, it's an incredible place. The old Rittenhouse Hotel, fantastic. Just, it's a beautiful area. Lots of movies that you could, I can't even name them because I forget all the names. But they...
Oh yeah, same make. So, I mean, Heaven Hill, again, we're the largest family-owned producer of distilled spirits in the U.S., right? So we make 1,500 barrels of whiskey a day, every single day, 365 days a year. Each barrel holds 55 gallons. We now surpass the 1.9 million barrels aging on our property. So we're this close to being 2 million barrels aging on our property, which is pretty incredible. Number 2 holder of aged inventory of American whiskey in the world, in the U.S. So all of those things.
Who's number 1?
Jim Beam is the number 1. We're the largest single site producer of whiskey because they produce it in multiple locations. So we're number 1 in making it. They're just number 1 because they can make it wherever they want. They don't care about the quality.
They don't care about the flavor either, as we've determined
just
previously.
I don't care.
Anyway, all that, I don't know where I was going with all that. What was the question? Okay. We only have 5 recipes, right? So we make all this different whiskey, but it's only under 5 recipes. And we say 5. Mellow Corn, we barely ever make. Bernheim wheat whiskey, we barely ever make. We make that twice a year for half a day. Rittenhouse, we only make once a month for 1 day. So 95% of our operation is making bourbon. But from those 5 recipes, majority bourbon, we can make 50 different labels, and we do. We have J.W. Dant, we have Henry McKenna, we have all these brands, and it's through our different aging processes. So that's why you can take, Pikesville and Rittenhouse, same exact whiskey, same exact still, same exact yeast strain, but if you age it and blend it differently, it's going to taste completely different.
Now, may I ask you a quick question? So,
Yes, sir.
Maker's Mark is doing a lot of different things with finishing. So they're using slightly different barrels.
Yep.
So they've done a number of different barrel experiments. As a matter of fact, we did a Maker's Mark that was finished with this barrel stave and this barrel stave, and it's like 20% of this type of wood and 20% of this type of wood. Is Heaven Hill doing any of that type of thing, or are you just staying pretty much?
2-part answer to that. Maker's Mark only makes Maker's Mark. Right? They don't make 5 different recipes and all these different labels. So Maker's Mark rotates their barrels to try to get consistency. They want Coca-Cola. They want Maker's Mark. So the only way to make Cherry Coke is to do those finishing techniques you're talking about, because they don't use different recipes or blending techniques. You know, nothing wrong with that. They're a maker's mark distillery. So the reason we don't do a lot of barrel finishing like they do is because we have different ways to affect flavor. And that's through, we have 60 different rick houses across 6 different properties. We can take them from bottom floors, top floors. You know, we can blend 2 barrels or 200 or 300 or 2,000. And those things will affect flavor more than finishing techniques will in general. Now we're starting to get into it with things like that toasted barrel you got to just try. But we're not gonna get into like, do you want to come to our distillery and do 5 different staves? Because we're too busy. We're making 50 products, they're making 1. And that's the difference.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's good to know.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And again, the next course that's coming out, Mel decided to parrot the pork and leek dumpling because of the sweet pepper that you're going to get out of the rye. So hopefully everybody enjoys it, and we'll move on from here.
This is our Old Fitzgerald Bottled and Bond Decanter series. We only release this twice a year in very small quantities. Lee had to fight for these bottles tonight, and you know, nobody says no to Lee, I think, over at but this is an 8-year-old wheated whiskey, so it's the same recipe we use for Larceny, Larceny Barrel Proof, our Old Fitzgerald Prime, and stuff like that we use in Kentucky. I mean, this is, you know, if you're going to put that much money into glass, you're probably going to put a lot of time and effort into the whiskey that goes into it, right? So what we do with this Old Fitzgerald is twice a year. So to be a bottled and bond, there's a couple different things that you have to do by law to be able to call it bottled and bond. So exactly 100 proof. It has to be made in America. It has to fit all the standards for a straight American whiskey. So that means never before used charred oak containers. To be straight, minimum 2 years. This is minimum 4 to be bottled and bond. You can't add any coloring or flavoring to it. It has to be made from 4 grains, so corn, wheat, rye, and malted barley. And then it has to be aged in a federally bonded warehouse, and it has to come from 1 of 2 distilling seasons. We have a spring and a fall. So that's why we have the spring and the fall release of Old Fitzgerald. So that's why I say this is the, you know, the Green Beret or the Eagle Scout of bourbon, because all those terms mean something, right? So made in Kentucky. I think Kentucky makes the best whiskey. You can argue with that if you want, but I think it makes the best whiskey. I think, you know, to be a bourbon, you have to fit all those quality standards. To be a straight bourbon, and then to be bottled and bond, that final characteristic. We've been monitored from start to finish. We know we're not sourcing from other people. There's no guesswork involved. So this is an expensive bottle at $85 suggested retail. If you find a bottle, it's probably going to be a little bit north of that in your liquor store. But a lot of the whiskeys we tried tonight were $20 or less. You know, if it says bottled and bond, you know what you're getting. Now, that all being said, I have yet to even try this Old Fitzgerald, so I'm very excited. The reviews are starting to come in. This is a wheated bourbon. So this is the same exact recipe as Pappy Van Winkle. In fact, we can trace the lineage back to the Old Fitzgerald distillery. The original Julian Pappy Van Winkle, worked for Old Fitzgerald. When he left to go make his own whiskey at Stitzel Weller, he brought that recipe with him and started making Pappy Van Winkle. Then when Old Fitzgerald was going out of business in the mid-80s, when Heaven Hill bought the label, with the label came the recipe, and we used that recipe to make this whiskey. Same whiskey, different, you know, through that lineage. Anyway, 100 proof, 8 years old, and in my opinion, some of the best whiskey on the market. So, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
So if we find it now, sorry, this one says 9.
Every spring and fall release has a different age statement.
Okay.
So that book is just a few months outdated.
So most of them are 8 now?
Every single bottle in the spring release is 8.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to let Jason tell us a little bit about Sacred Bond as he pours it into his glass, and I pour some into my wife's glass.
I have this glass. You have that.
So everyone enjoy your hospital notes. In our defense, people describe Lefroy as burnt Band-Aids. So, I mean, you know.
That's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Iodine and smoke, right? Yeah, that's awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so So a lot of people know the brands that Heaven Hill owns, but most people don't know Heaven Hill as a company. We are the largest family-owned producer of distilled spirits in the U.S., 6th largest producer in general, family-owned or not. So we own a lot of different brands. Sacred Bond, the parent brand to this is Christian Brothers Brandy, which is a very widely distributed kind of value brandy out there. We also make Hypnotic. We do Burnett's. We own Deep Eddy. We own Black Velvet Canadian whiskey.
How much Deep Eddy do you sell here in Maryland?
Maryland's the #3 market in the U.S. behind Texas, which is where it's made.
Just like anything?
No, just for Deep Eddy.
Okay.
So Texas is #1, Florida's #2, and Maryland is #3.
Per capita,
And
are we
it's
the highest?
per capita, the highest by far. And it's because in Maryland, you order a crush, it comes in a pint glass with 3 ounces of vodka.
Yeah.
You order a crush anywhere else,
They don't know
it's
what
not
it
the same. Yeah. So because of the crush, Deep Eddy is an
We have,
insane
I don't know if you've
brand.
been down the way on O'Donnell, but there's a Shipyard Pub, basically had just opened right before the pandemic started.
Yeah.
And their bread and butter right now is crushes of gigantic takeaway size. That's
that
how they,
too.
their garage door entrance,
Yeah.
that's how they were selling things. Murals painted on the side of the
Yeah.
thing of we're crushing it.
Crushing it, yeah.
Crushing it, because that's basically what they did to
Yeah.
stay alive during the pandemic.
Yeah, sure.
People were just lining up to get
their
crushes.
to-go crushes
Yes,
or whatever.
Exactly.
Big things with the giant straws.
In general, Maryland has a they love like they love like sweet drinks in general. So like this is one of the top markets for Grand Marnier. People drink shots of Grandma in Maryland. That does not happen anywhere outside Maryland. I'm gonna tell you that right now. Yeah, it's like
Yeah, they're when I
yeah. So a lot of companies launch their sweet spirits, their liqueurs, their flavored vodkas in Maryland. In general. Because Maryland brings sweet drinks more than almost any other market.
That is what we do, and interesting things.
So, speaking of sweet, this is not a whiskey, this is a brandy, so that means made from grapes, right? This is out of California. So, the Christian Brothers, really cool history behind Christian Brothers. It was a monastery in California. They started making wine, and then eventually they distilled their wine into brandy. If you see Christian Brothers on the shelf today, it is a value brandy. We make flavors, we make regular Christian Brothers. It's used a lot in cooking in a lot of famous restaurants. But Sacred Bond is not the same as the regular Christian Brothers on the shelf. So has anybody in this room drank Tito's before?
Oh, yeah.
We all love Tito's.
Sorry.
So, handcrafted in pot stills, right? And if you want some swampland in Arizona, I can tell you that too. There's no way that because of their volume, they're still handcrafting in pot stills, right? Because you couldn't keep up with demand. That's the difference between Christian Brothers and Sacred Bond. Column still, pot still. In order to make Tito's, to make Evan Williams, to make Christian Brothers, you got to use a column still because you can continually distill alcohol all day, every day. You never need to take a break. Now, if you want to do a crafty, unique spirit, you use a pot still. That's what we do with Sacred Bond. So between every single batch of Sacred Bond, you have to put it in the pot still, heat it up so it evaporates, take out the mash that you've used, so all the spent grapes, clean it, do another batch. It's a very labor-intensive process. So if you want high volume, column. If you want craft, pot, right? So Tito's can still say handcrafted in pot stills because they ship it in on tanker trucks from Ohio, Indiana, and run it through their pot still one time and bottle it.
They
So
drive it past
because
pot
it went, yeah, because it went in the pot still once, they can say handcrafted pot stills. But another story for another day. This one again is very crafty. It is a pot still, a true pot still brandy, and it is 4 years old. It's aged in our Evan Williams barrels. So again, bourbon can only use their barrels one time. So we we can sell our barrels to Sacred Bond, to tequila distilleries, wine, beer, to age their spirits. So you should get a lot of bourbon in this because it is a one-use barrel that we give to Sacred Bond. But then being a brandy base, that great, a lot of sweetness from the grape. So
It's a win-win, you're helping your own company out.
We sell our own barrels to our own company.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, it's great. You know, our owner is a genius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure they do. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. But enjoy this. And again, to Lee's credit, I think the first bottle that ever arrived in Maryland was moonshined up from DC.
Dukes of Hazzard style. You have to jump over a body of water without.
Yeah, he was using an old 1920s Ford out running the cops to get it up here. But you know, this really is the first place in Maryland that has had this product. And really, I mean, not to blow smoke, the whole reason we brought Saber Bond in is because Lee proved to us that there was a market for this, that we could include it in tastings like this. So it's growing to a Maryland product because of tonight, which is pretty cool. So enjoy.